is probably going to be my most unconventional episode to date. We are going to engage in a meaningful conversation, as we always do, regarding shared experiences as human beings. More specifically, those that are shared in a public capacity. Welcome to the episode that will hopefully shed some positive insights into what and how we share our life experiences. Chronicles with Stephie, the podcast. Welcome, everyone. Think of a word, a positive word, and it may just be a chronicle shared in this space. Let's make life more meaningful. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. God shared his only Son with a sinful people so that life eternally could be had. Hi everybody! I tell you, the most unconventional. Welcome back to this space on the internet that we are curating to make life more meaningful. If you can't tell, I'm kind of happy. But I've just been living in an abundance of blessings, and I'm just so happy to be back in this space where I get to share my experiences with you. So if this is something that you will enjoy, or if you just enjoy listening to my voice, continue to stick around. Chronicles with Stephie, shared experiences chronicles. Okay, let's just dive in. God gave his only Son for a sinful people so that life eternally could be had. That measure of giving, that measure of exposing, that measure of revealing is far too great to compute or compare. It is this such great measure to which we as human beings should probably subscribe to than most of the controversial and not so positive analogies and metaphors that we overindulge in. That could be a possible reason why we become so overwhelmed and exhausted in living, because we are consumed by too much all at once, and our minds become oversaturated with data or information. I think our brains were created to critically think, yes, in order to create and live a righteous way, a way that is ordained by God. He gave us simple instructions in order to lead this life. I get into so much debate with this when I say that life is so simple, but it's the living is hard. But God literally gave us simple instructions in order to lead this life on earth. But as human beings, we tend to complicate and overcomplicate the simplest of tasks or experiences. Weighing in our 2 cents and opinions in matters that didn't warrant them in the first place. But I guess that's just the human experience, right? A difference in opinions on matters that we may or may not completely understand. We then indulge in those matters in various formats. We share our daily lives in the hope to inspire others, but not realizing that all experiences may not be appropriate to share in a given context. And I'm so happy that I get to, with my wisdom, break this down. Our experiences in this life may not be similar, for starters. As what you may go through, what I may go through, is completely different. And even though what may go for the goose, it may not necessarily go for the gander. But does it mean it's not worthy of being shared? Additionally, the divide of resources that aid in our human experiences may not necessarily be had by everyone. And again, does it mean that it should not be shared? In contrast, insensitive experiences that may or may not be triggering, should those be considered appropriate to share in the name of informing or educating? The examples are so exhaustive that this episode would need a part 2, which I don't see myself doing. So then, how do we determine and conscientiously decide what and how we share or lived experiences? Now, in previous episodes, I would have stated that if we're exuding our particular task, behavior, talent, purpose, does it serve God or does it serve man? Is it for the advancement of his kingdom work, or for the views and the clicks and the likes to go viral? Does it encompass a legacy of longevity, or just a simple dimple 1 minute of fame, and a week long back and forth in comments and, dinner table talks? The experiences we share, do they honor God? Or does it just give us temporary popularity? Now, I ask these because as a growing individual, I often observe us, especially the generation, especially the generation post mine. And sometimes I really do sit and ponder what will happen a year from now, a decade from now, when I'm older and they are now in the positions of quote unquote decision making, etc., etc. Do they possess the knowledge of sharing accurate and thoughtful experiences to create a world of equity, to create a world of love, to create a world of peace? Now, just continue to indulge in this episode a little longer while I share my somewhat of a, let's call it a monologue. If God so chose to share with the world the only child he ever had with his other 8 billion who fell from grace, shouldn't that enlighten us to think before we share our lived experiences? His choice was so meaningful, and I can only imagine difficult, because I cannot fathom for the life of me my intellect and cognitive ability to give up my only picnic. So I can only imagine how difficult that is. Yet God made that great sacrifice because, it was for the greater good of humanity. So let's be honest now. In the name of God, would we say it's appropriate to share acts of violence towards fellow humans? Share sacred parts of our bodies towards our fellow humans? Share expletive choice words towards our fellow humans? To share hurt? To share trauma and aggression towards our fellow humans? Share dishonesty, disloyalty, unkindness, starvation, exploitation toward our fellow humans? That speaks to the what we share, because again, we're not naive. But do we promote those things with a sense of education? Do we promote it with a sense of togetherness and forward-thinking actions? I think that's so important. Forward-thinking and critical actions towards the betterment of the entire human race. Do we share it in that regard? Do we share it using narratives of unpleasantries or narratives of kindness? In other words, the point I'm making is, how do we resensitize and retrain our minds in thinking before we actually share what we think should be shared in the name of humanity? And I'm sure the argument, it surely exists that we share the quote unquote bad stuff because, we need to learn and we need to, be aware of just how vile we can actually be, or we need to learn as human beings what we're doing to each other around the globe. Or we need to learn as human beings just how insensitive we are, especially to the tragedies of the world. Or we need to be less selfish. We need to share these things in order to invoke a sense of us being more caring and sharing of our time, sharing of our resources and ourselves to aid in the unkindness that occurs around the world. But where's the how? How do we share positive and not so positive experiences in a meaningful way? Because I am, for highlighting both good and bad experiences, but I am for highlighting it in a way that is received with a semblance of grace. And if you've not watched that grace episode, what are y'all doing now? Please catch up on previous podcast episodes. So I'm more of, I hold the sentiment of sharing things that is shared in a way that is received with a semblance of grace, because experiences that are elucidated with a background of thoughtfulness, a background of love, a background of peace, a background of sensitivity, without judgment. Something that's such an arduous task as human beings to do. Without judgment and with care for the 8 billion of us living on this planet. Needs to be done in a semblance of grace. And it can be as simple as asking, God, what do we do? Just go to the Father. Just ask, like, God, what do we do? Or even ask Him. Say, God, what would you do? Because stopping to think and ask, it actually would please God. God would be pleased if I shared this experience. If I did not share this experience. Just to stop. Stop to think and ask Him. God, are you pleased if I do or don't? You understand what I'm trying to get at? Because for one, is God going to be pleased overall if we're sharing it? We should ask ourselves these questions. Is this pleasing to be shared? When I stand to be accountable in front of God, was this experience worth sharing overall? Secondly, was it for God's advancement and His kingdom? Was it for His gain or was it for my gain? Some of the times, the things that we share, we need to be more selfless rather than selfish. It's not to be lightning onto ourselves just because we want to be popular or, earn a buck. And we have to really stop some of the time and really think it through and ask, like, is this going to be beneficial to God? Ask, if it's going to be a 1 minute famous and go viral trend, or because YOLO, or things of that nature. Because we have to understand and learn that not everything needs to be shared. And that is such a crucial statement. Understanding and learning not everything needs to be shared. It's so crucial. Understanding and learning that everything should not be shared for enslavement to $1 is crucial. I just said that, not because for the lightning of a buck. Understanding and learning that not everything will be received well is also crucial. And that sometimes some things are meant to invoke positive radical change. Sometimes some things are meant to invoke positive radical rebellion as well. That's a whole nother episode. And sometimes some things are meant to invoke positive radical evolution. And those things are very much crucial. And that all these things, it has to be okay. Some things will be shared for fun. Some things will be shared with the seriousness of it. And some things will invoke a movement. And that has to be okay as well. But the point I'm trying to allude to is that we need to be more self-conscious and aware of the things that we post. And ask ourselves, be accountable to ourselves and each other. Is this for the advancement of God? Is it for the advancement of His kingdom? Is it for the advancement of His people that I need to share and be accountable with in our experiences? Is it just for, again, the enslavement of $1? Is it just to tear down, or is it just to uplift? We need to be more conscious of the things that we partake in and the things that we share. And it's often a quote, I think it is, and hopefully I'm saying it correctly. It's, you may see a man's face, but you can't see his heart. You never know an individual may or may not be going through in this human experience, and something that you end up sharing, that's that one thing that threw them off the edge. So it might be all kiki kaka hand jokes for you, great. You were able to give yourself a good laugh because of how you were feeling. But did you ever stop to ponder that maybe this that brought you joy may not bring someone else joy? This that gave you a good chuckle may not necessarily bring someone else chuckle. And then the question comes into play now, because again, we're just not naive. Well, if it brought me joy, it might bring somebody else joy, so I'm going to share. Not because somebody else might not have the same amount of joy means that I shouldn't be sharing. And all these questions will come into play. Don't get me wrong. All these questions will come into the forefront. But it's just a shared responsibility. We have to be accountable one to another to be able to intellectually decipher what warrants being shared and what warrants not being shared. We must know right from wrong. We ought to know right from wrong, and not injecting our opinions of right and wrong. Right and wrong is very basic. I remember my grandmother had a quote. She said, if the thing is wrong, don't do it. Are we so far from intellect and intelligence to determine and critically think of when something is positive versus negative, when something is right versus wrong, when something is righteous versus unrighteous? Are we so far from that intelligence? I beg to differ. That would be a tragedy. So we are aware of that which will just go viral and give a good chuckle and let us be famous for a minute, and we are aware of the things that will enact a positive and uplifting change. We are aware. So, let's never allow our shared experiences to become lost in translation. It is our responsibility to develop a safe space in this life that we are all living, and not just on a screen that our eyes are glued to 24/7. We are each other's keepers, whether we agree or disagree, whether we are from the upper echelons of society or just the echelons of society. Whether we care or not, we are responsible for each other. Because one thing I learned in my it's my very short time on earth so far, we all bleed red. We don't bleed purple, blue, or yellow, just red. And most importantly, the same air breathed into you by God is the very same breath that was breathed into me through God. The God who sacrificed, sharing his only for you and I. So think before you speak and seek God before you share. I don't have a specific song today, if I'm going to be very honest with you. What have I been listening? I've been listening to, her name is Kat Burns, and she has this song, You Can Live More. I don't know the rest of it, but it's Kat Burns, Live More. Pretty sure once you type her up, listen to her, you'll find it. So let's be conscious of what we share, how we share, and in the context of where we share as well. Let's be each other's keeper. As per usual, peace and love and light. And I'll see you in the next episode. Bye everyone.